then we can kick off. So just give us a few minutes and then we can promptly kick off at by 10:05. Let's see the music. Awesome. Thank you. Let's get started. We will have one of our panelists joining us as we continue to chat. But thank you everyone for making the time to join us today to talk about research and really the state of research. Does it matter? And look at how we best organize research within our organizations to bring value. My name is Sharon. I will be doing a lot of talking and not so much answering. I'm joined here by Jan, and we're waiting for Cindy to join. He will introduce himself when he gets here. I'm a senior UX designer with Cindy, and just a quick shout out to our amazing organizers, Carla. So if you haven't had the chance to interact with Carla is a team of amazing problem solvers who are driven to lead Africa's digital transformation and innovation. And what they do is they tie together strategy, research, design, and tech to create products, services, and the new business models that meet today's needs and future goals. If you haven't, check out the amazing work they're doing. They're all over LinkedIn, and just find them, look at what they're up to, and feel free to engage with them. Jan, do you want to quickly introduce yourself before we kick off?
Thanks a lot, Sharon. Hi, everyone. Very nice to be here, to be able to interact with you. Big shout out to Carla also for putting this event together. I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing, so thanks for having me. So my name is Jan. I've been living in Senegal for the last 10 years, originally from France. And 5 years ago, we started a research and design company that we called UX from Senegal. And so we started actually not as a company, but more as a community to share about user experience design and research. And little by little, the community grew, but it also attracted clients. And so we had to become a little bit more legal to work with these clients. So we structured ourselves and started working with local fintech startups and telecom operators in Senegal. Long story short, so right now we are a team of around 40 people spread across the continent between Dakar, Abidjan, Kigali, Accra, and Lagos. And what we do mostly is to support large organizations, big tech companies or small startups to make sure they have products that are adapted to the local context. And we do that by doing naturally a lot of research, which is something like 80% of what we do. But also to help us democratize this, we build an academy, which is the UX Design Academy that trains people on UX research and design. And also we created a platform that is that helps you connect and take your own end research and connect to a network of surveyors across the continent, so that research is much more accessible, notably to small companies. Yeah, so that's it in a nutshell, and I'm really thrilled to be able to share with you guys today. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Jan. Just doing a quick check. Cindy, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Thanks.
Fantastic, fantastic. You just caught us introducing ourselves. Please go and tell who you are, what you get up to, and then we'll kick off.
All right. Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Mpumelelo Tsindi, Mpumi for short. I head up user experience at Old Mutual. Yeah, so I've been doing that for about 3 years, trying to build the capability and sustain maturity in that case in the organization. So basically, what we do is we obviously primarily support the digital transformation efforts of the organization, and we're trying to now scale that across all our operations or all the regions we operate in within the continent. So we've got about 13, if not 14 countries that Old Mutual is in on the continent. And we support them in terms of regions. So we've got South Africa, SADC, West Africa, East Africa. And yeah, that's essentially what I do here. We've got a team of about 30 designers at this point in time, designing across different aspects of the transformation program. And we're trying to scale that into business units and into our other regions. I think that's about it in terms of my background.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Cindy. Becky, nice to have you here as well. Thank you for joining. Excited to learn with you as well. I will be looking at the chat box in case you have questions. We want to make sure we're covering everything that is on you guys' minds. So feel free to drop your questions and I will ask them to our panelists. But to kick us off, and Jan, I'm going to throw this one at you. Where do you feel the research function belongs within an organization? And how do we best organize it?
Well, I guess for most of the organization that we see on the continent, it's to the one who wants to do it. It's not that structured yet. And so generally it falls into the hand of the people who are curious enough to really be willing to talk to the customer. But we did a little bit of research on the state of UX research, by the way, on the continent. And what we found from that is that for the large one, mainly, you will see lead researchers that lead an entire team of researchers. And that's great. That's maybe not for the companies that are on the continent, but mostly international companies that start opening shops on the continent. And it's great working with them because they know about this, and they don't need to build their capacity. Just need support to understand the local context on the continent. And this could be Wikipedia, Google, and other companies like that, pretty well structured on the research side. For middle-sized companies, let's say for 50 to 100, 200 people companies, I know you correct me, Sharon, and sharing your experience with Sandy, but I guess it leads sometime in the lead designer, or sometimes they have a lead researcher, but sometimes there is a lead of design that handle this part of research. Very strongly also led by the product managers, who tends to be more and more investing in research. Sometime, and this is a lot of our customers, this is the expansion manager responsible for that. So not really product oriented, but since they need to make sure the product is adapted to new markets where they're going to expand, they have to do a lot of research. And sometimes marketing team, And even sometimes, and this is what we found in the report, that a lot of people don't have structured research team, but rely on the field agents or salesperson to actually bring back a lot of insight. So they don't call themselves researcher, but to be honest, they do an amazing job at bringing those feedback up. And for the small startups, I guess, it's mostly this UX, UI designer, researcher, product manager that does everything. We all know guys like that in our environment. We were the same when we started. And I guess it's very exciting for us, but it's also overwhelming because they have to handle a lot of that. And for them, convincing the stakeholders to buy into research is not that easy because they just have a limited amount of time and resources for them. Yeah.
Spot on. Yes, we definitely been able to experience the decentralized nature of research and just being plugged into or embedded in functions that need it the most. Cindy, I want to hear from you because Old Mutual is a long-standing organization, and just how has your practice of research been, and what are some of the successes or failures you've seen with the way you've organized research, and how has it evolved in your organization?
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I think, so when I joined, I think about 3 years now, it's my 4th year here, it was really, it was really from a UX perspective and maybe a service design perspective. It wasn't really that formal and that organized. So we already had kind of a research lab or usability testing lab in Cape Town that that was probably being used more for meetings than actual research at that point in time. But I must also mention, I think if I look at the whole of the organization, we have a strong, within the marketing space, we have a strong strategy and research group, but obviously that's not necessarily the stuff that we deal with at a UX service level, but there's a bit of an overlap, but there's a strong capability within the organization that does that, and they're really good at it. They do some thorough work across the continent, right, to just help us understand obviously what local regions, what's playing out in local regions, especially from a digital trend and from digital trends and what adoption looks like and so on. So that's the one piece. The piece that I think we're obviously focusing on is this kind of user research piece to inform products and product strategy and services. We started kind of, obviously, as I came into the organization to build the UX capability, we started to mature some of that stuff, right? To say, okay, cool, how do we become more methodical about it, right? We've gotten quite a lot of progress because now we've grown as a team and we're embedded in delivery teams. So there's quite a bit of research going on. When we started, we also did quite a bit of extensive research to inform the digital strategy in essence. So there was quite a big piece of strategy of research and concept validation that happened then. And then we started to carry that out. So now it's about this thing of how do we keep continuously informing, the strategy or what we are delivering and our outcomes as we go along. And that's coming along relatively well, but I can't really sing that much praises at this point in time, because I think that there's obviously need to, let's say, be methodical about it, right? As UX and service design practitioners, right? So there's room for us to be more methodical about it, although we have some strong leads in our spaces that kind of hold that right now. But how do we kind of obviously, democratize it, if I can use that word? So that's the one thing. And the other thing is the knowledge management around that, right? How do we share insights in a way, so if we are more methodical about it, we have kind of one currency, one common language of talking about research and the insights, etc. And then we need to kind of obviously share those insights across. So now, even though we like a team that's relatively connected, it's still a bit siloed, right? These insights still need to be connected some way, somehow, and they still need to build on top of each other. So that's the space that we sit in now, where we're really trying to say, okay, cool, how do we bring this thing together? How do we have, single, profiles, and we all have the same understanding of those profiles? Not that, I have a version of it and you're on another project, you have another version of the same thing, and they don't really connect. So that's really where we are, where we try to kind of, improve the maturity of the capability. And I think one last thing to add there is that the way that we are structured, we do have a service design team that's backed up, that follows a systems thinking method, right, to thoroughly do some research internally and a little bit externally, but mostly trying to understand how the organization is functioning at a service level, and also getting out of the building and understanding customers. And then we have the UXers that sit in my team that really are focused more on the product. It's on the digital products and services themselves. So yeah, we're not doing enough yet. It's not as well coordinated as it should be, and that's what we're working towards now.
Very, very cool. I will come back. I will circle back to that question. I have a couple of more things I would like us to dig deeper into that. But just quick one, Josephine reminds us to tag Kala HQ on Twitter. If you are on Twitter, give Kala a shout, ask questions there. We will be collecting questions from all social platforms. Yeah, quick question to you. What challenges or gaps do you see researchers and organizations facing today at a very individual level?
That's a really interesting one, and I guess a lot of people in the group will share that. But in the study that we did, I think it was like 2/3 of the people mentioned the first challenge as being the recruitment and profiling of participants. And it's really hard because indeed, the complexity of our society, urban areas, peri-urban areas, rural areas, and finding the right profile for your exact studies is really hard. And we even see that with our clients, even for them to be able to understand what are their own segments, it's really hard. So we have like segmentation studies first, and then after qualitative study to be able to really nail it, but it's never easy. So it's always a back and forth. And so that's definitely one of the major challenges they have. And that's actually, funny enough, the only external challenge that we've seen. All the other challenges that we have seen from the survey are internal. So just after we find the inclusion within the product development process. So how can you make sure that this research component fits at the right time into the product development process? And as you all know, we never have time in product. We need to release, and so we never have time to do research. Third one is resources and budget, and very links to the fourth one, which is stakeholders buy-in. And I think we're going to come back on this one, but it's very important, interesting to see how researchers on the continent are very frustrated mostly by internal things. They feel almost a little bit in a cell, that they have so much they can do. But the company is not allowing them the time, the resources to really express what they can do in terms of research. And naturally, it's also on their side. They need to be able to express in a different way what could be the value of research for this organization. And the last one that we found, which could be interesting as well as a question for ourselves, researchers, is the reliability of data. Even researchers and designers who responded to the survey said sometimes you cannot really trust the data that you have. And so you get challenged by your bosses. And if you cannot really defend that very strongly, it breaks the entire rationale behind the value of research. So I think there is a long way to go. There is great effort doing on the profiling and recruitment side by different companies. But the rest, it's mostly internal, and I guess discussion like the one we have today are very important to get us started. And I think this is really a movement that we should keep on pushing to make sure stakeholders understand the value and how to handle research within an organization.
Amazing. But just quickly highlight what has just been mentioned at a very high level as some of the gaps that we're facing within research at an individual level and at an organizational level. We have the democratization of research. We have the validity of the insights we're getting, ability to recruit at the point at which research gets embedded within the product process. I know I've missed a couple, but I hope you guys caught all of them, because we will be coming back to this to figure out how we, make a case for research, knowing that these are the gaps we're experiencing. But before that, I can see that there are no questions on the chat box. So fantastic. Actually, a question just came in from Becky to Jan. Could you mention any alternative sources of data that would be more reliable or valid?
Yeah. And I'm not saying that UX research is not valid data. I guess, you need to do it properly and to really adapt your format of delivering data to the stakeholders that you have in front of you. So for instance, we worked with Square, which is a fintech company in the US. And they wanted us to codify and quantify all the qualitative insight, something that you don't do often in qualitative research, where you don't want to be statistically representative. But we had this person who really wanted to have the number of people who say exactly that, the number of people who said exactly that. And that was her way to be able to pitch qualitative research to the stakeholders. I think one of the major risks we have in our organization is that people trust a lot data, like numbers. But when you come with qualitative research and you cannot really say how many people you interviewed, what are their profile, in which segment they fit into, it makes your data a little bit shaky for some of the people who are less sensitive to the great insight you may have find with one person, and this insight from one person can change your entire product and company, but it will not be responsive to this one. So I guess this is that. Second source of data, and I think this is great right now because you see company merging different set of data, but I guess it's the data from your platform already. What do you have in terms of BI that comes out, in terms of churn, in terms of people using your different part of your platform and services? This is super, super important. Second set of data, customer support. We always do calls with customer support guys because they know so much about the company, and actually not a lot of people in the company know what they know. It's really interesting, and they have so much great feedback for you. And the third source of data, I will say, is quantitative research, so surveys. We're a big fan of face-to-face surveys. That's why we created this software called Luca that helps you to do that. But we believe that meeting face-to-face people quantitatively can really help you get a lot of great data that can help you better segment, better understand when there is a potential or major pain point. It doesn't tell you why happens, but at least it helps you understand where there is something to look at. And then after, you can do qualitative research to specify the why behind that. So in a nutshell, I would say BI data from the company and customer support, quantitative data from surveys, and ideally face-to-face, I believe is the strongest thing on the continent still. And then after, qualitative research and in-depth interviews. And thanks for the new setup. I see my face in the little frame. I found that very funny. That's really cool.
Cool. Thanks for that, Jan. Any other question? I will quickly pause there, or briefly pause there rather, and take a question from any of the guys in the audience who would like to just directly ask a question. Okay, cool. We'll keep going then. Cindy, you talked about one of the gaps in research today being the lack of democratization of research and just in how we share insight within organizations today. So having that in mind, but also all the challenges that we've just spoken about, how do we make a case for research within our organizations, and how do we get people to listen to research?
Yeah. I really think the main thing here, or the linchpin for this, is that democratization. So how do we get people who are not designers to actually go out with us, listen to customers, listen to contact center agents, and feel the qualitative impact of the feedback, right, or of the research, right? So that's when I've best seen it work in a team, in a kind of big agile delivery team, when we collaborated with POs, product owners, we collaborated with BAs, essentially anybody who was kind of involved other than maybe the technical people, to actually pair up with designers and go out and do the research, right? So it's really that for me is the main thing, to understand that if we want to be structured and methodical about doing research, getting insights that we can share in a common language across the organization, we probably need an owner, a kind of center of excellence. In my mind, that then says that this research is a design-led activity. It's not, we don't own it. We only lead the activity because we want to kind of make sure that, there isn't bias, there's objectivity, there's, the insights or the data is interpreted is interpreted in let's call it a scientific way, right? That's really how I see us overcoming it, or selling it in the organization, is exposing more and more people to it, right? Because then we kind of start to, it's not just the UX designer or the researcher in a project advocating for it, but it's the team themselves, because they've gone out there, they've understood the customer's problems, or they've understood the space well enough to be able to speak on behalf of it, right? It's just, obviously that has to scale, right? You can't do that in one team, but really I think that's the best possible way for it to scale, for other people to know that they've got the ability to do the research and to leverage the experts in the space to be able to kind of just guide them. But, this is a tool that they can use to make decisions and inform their work. And really that's I think is the most important thing. But I think, as Jan was talking, I think it's also important to it's never, you can't overstate the importance of executive sponsorship when it comes to anything associated with design and some of this qualitative driven methodologies, right? It's you just have to have some level of executive sponsorship that give you the platform to be able to do this thing, so that you've got some backup when you come in, when you interact with the rest of the organization. It's really, really important. That can be overstated. I think that's really the main thing for me. Get other people, get executive sponsorship behind you. Could be one sponsor, it could be multiple, but there must be somebody who owns it at an executive level. And then secondly is to make sure that we collaborate with other people that are not designers, right, to do this work. Yeah.
Very cool. Just key takeaway there. Get the rest of the organization to understand the impact of qualitative research. That's very cool. And do you have anything you want to add to that?
Straight on point. No? I think it's never easy. I mean, we tried as well, but having the stakeholders buy-in, it's never easy. And I think you need that. I just can emphasize what CD says. You really need the stakeholders buy-in, because otherwise, even if you do great research, people are not going to take your recommendation. And that's fine. You can still do your job, but that's really frustrating if you do that for several projects, doing great research, having amazing insight. You think it can lead to the future of the company, and people don't even take that insight in consideration, and that's really frustrating in the long term.
Actually, want to highlight something. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think those relationships, especially with like the people who own the projects at an execution level, like a product owner, those are like extremely, extremely key. Those are the people that I'm kind of most invested in the success. The execs may be looking at the metrics, right, to say, hey, do we deliver this thing on time and so on, and maybe the lagging measures around cost savings and revenue generation. But people like the product owners, who are the link essentially into that metrics-driven world, right, of numbers and etc. I think they're the people that we try to really pull into the research, into the user testing, into all of this stuff, so that they can also come out and say, and even hold us accountable when we get to the design, right, to say, hey guys, but isn't this what came out of the research? Then why does the designer speak to that type of thing, right? So that's really important, that if they can get that level of ownership, and it helps them become better product owners and make better decisions. So yeah.
Very cool. I wanted to just quickly highlight something, Cindy, that she said on the importance of getting executive sponsorship or executive buy-in for research, which is very closely tied to a question that we have from an anonymous attendee. Hey, Anonymous. What are the best ways to educate executives on the importance of research since they decide on the budgets? Do you want to take that one?
You want to go, Cynthia?
Yeah. Cindy, either of you can take that one.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I can. So, sorry, I didn't hear that. Okay.
I can, let me just rehash the question, and then either of you can take it. what are the best ways to educate executives on the importance of research since they decide on the budgets?
Yeah, and you want to go first?
Please go, my friend. Please go.
Sure. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I think there's a lot of case studies that point to the best benefit of research, right? There's case studies, and now I need to try and probably find them and share some links. But there are some case studies that say that this is research that wasn't done well, even within our organizations, or even in a previous organization that I was at, right? Because we're doing a experience design there for about 7 or more years, right? And through that, we get quite a bit of kind of case studies, right? To say, hey, we were brought in to fix a project because there was no research done, or the research wasn't done properly. We therefore need to do better research now, right? And really for me, it's highlighting. I am super aggressive, or I get super hyperbolous as well about the dangers and the downsides of doing the wrong thing, right? It's a matter of the investments will be made, right? And obviously people want the highest return. They want to make sure they're doing the right thing. And basically we tell execs sometimes that we don't know. We know that this is the right thing to do. You don't want to insult an executive because that's a business objective. They set their eyes on doing something. But our role is to help with the how, right? Number one, we always take your objective as a hypothesis, right? But let's put that aside for a second. Let's say that we know that this is the thing to do because maybe competitors are doing it and we need to be competitive. But how do we do it, right? That's really important. So that's really what I try to sell. I try to sell the fact that there's a how that is unanswered here, right? Do we do this thing on simple things like, do we do this thing on WhatsApp, or do we do it on a native app, or do we do it on web? Is this thing for this part of the market that you've identified, or a subset of this market, right? You can't broad brush stroke the whole segment and say, yeah, all low income people, here's a solution. Right? We need to understand, especially for adoption, it's important to find those nuances within that space to say, okay, we're going to target this segment of the low income market with this specific approach. So the how is extremely, extremely important. It's extremely, extremely important. And that's really what I try to sell, to say, you could have a good idea, but if you don't execute it well, your investment is lost, right? However, we need the research to inform, as closely or as empirically as possible, how we are actually going to go about it. So I'm really about selling the risk of investing in something that you don't know, that is uninformed in terms of its approach to solutioning or product design or implementation. So yeah, that's really my biggest thing about getting stakeholders on board, right? And maybe one last thing that's worth mentioning there is also saying, if we have been brought in as designers, as a designer, for instance, or in some cases, hey, even as a researcher, right? But let's just say as a designer, as a kind of all-rounder designer who does research and then eventually designs. I always tell my team that this is your process to do work. So when the stakeholder says that you can't do research, it's up to you to say then I can't do my work, right? It's not about always being about this soft thing of trying to negotiate. Some things are not negotiable. Some things you won't negotiate with a dev with, right? So don't negotiate with the designer and say, I need to talk to some people, right? Before I can, I know exactly what it is I'm designing. It's okay. I'm not going to do a 12-week piece of research, but I need to do something, right? I need to squeeze this in so that I can actually inform the designs of the solution and where we're going. So there's that one piece on the ground in the team, people asserting this is our process. We need to do a little bit of research or understand, as we call it. And then on the other side, from an executive perspective, it's really, highlighting the downside of investing in something that you don't have a structured approach towards implementing. Yeah.
Really good point. Not much to add on that. I really like the last point about being strong and, let's say, being confident, which is not easy when you are new in your field, when the field is even new on a continent or in a region or in a company. But you need to be confident. And for instance, right now, everything that we do, we impose at least user testing, if not more stronger type of research. Otherwise, we don't go. Just doing UX, UI for the sake of just designing something without knowing why you design it, for who, doesn't make sense. And right now it's in our offers, our teams understand that, and that we lost a little bit of clients for that, but at least when they come back 1 year after, they're going to be sensitized to that. Also, way we do that, because we do that on the agency side, but at the same story, we still need to convince stakeholders, to invest in research. We generally start small. We start with a small, like 1 month and a half, 2 months project maximum. It needs to be fast. It's something like 15, 12 interviews maximum. That's a great way to start. Second thing is to mix quant and qual. Quantitative research is very impactful for stakeholders most of the time, a little bit more than qualitative research. So if you want to make your point through on qualitative research, try to mix that with quantitative. So even like small surveys of 300, 400 people, but spread across several countries, for instance, or several areas in your countries, can have a huge impact. And then you see so many things coming out of the quants, but you don't understand why. And that's so easy then after to sell your UX or qualitative research, because you have so many whys over there and you just need to go and listen to the people. And the third thing I would say that worked pretty well for us is example of competitors. I mean, the more people go on the top of the management of companies, sometimes the more followers they are and the less risk taker they are compared to the entrepreneurs they once were, I believe. And so they follow others. And so if you just show them a great company that invested ton on research, and you show them that research they've been doing, if it's public, they're just going to follow. And they say, oh, but Square have done that study on cryptocurrency in Africa, why? And so they get really intrigued on that, and they really prompt and they follow. And I think that's really much the case, in terms of investment and fundraising on the continent here, where just you see a lot of followers. And it's probably the same. So you have to leverage that and try to find a good example here and there, saying that, okay, these guys invested in research, so you should probably do the same. Naturally, people understand the value of research sometimes when it's a very competitive environment and you need to distinguish themselves. So at some point, we even ourselves try to pitch people to do research, but they were like in a monopoly position, having 70% of the market. They don't care. And once you understand the position they are on the market, you can really bring the value of research and design in general. But otherwise, we wasted so much time at the beginning, try to convince, the local telecom operator here in Senegal that was 70% market share. But right now, in 2 years, they got really challenged and lost the leadership on finance here and mobile money product because of fintech arrived, and they were very strong on the user experience. So and a good example like that can really help you, pass your message through.
Thanks, Jan. Thanks, Cindy. I want to add to what the guys have just said. I think also very important to make sure that as researchers, you're responding to the right question. And this only happens when you're aligned with the business. So research does not need to come into the middle and start attacking the problem from when the problem has been so greatly distilled. If you understand what the business is up to, if you know that the focus of the business is acquiring 200% users in the next quarter, then you begin to think from that perspective instead of an implementation perspective. So very important to also stay aligned to what the business is up to and make a case for your findings based on what the business objectives are. Please keep the questions coming. I will I'll quickly highlight something that Cindy said and then roll off of that. So you mentioned the importance of having executive sponsorship. But beyond that, what other relationships are important for research within organizations, and how do we foster these relationships?
Yeah, you want to go, Cindy?
No, go for it, Jan.
Okay. Well, and I guess you have much more experience than me on that. But I think what's really interesting is when you use research to mix different teams of a company around a problem. We're working currently with an agri-tech startup in Nigeria. And what's really interesting is that you have a very strong operational team that are people who are every day with farmers, but you work with them doing the research. But you also bring the marketing team that's do beautiful things from their office in Lagos, but never got to really visit, the farmers in the field they're working with. And then after you mix also with the product team, most of them as well, designers or product manager, in a beautiful and crowded Lagos city, but not very far from the farmers in the north of the country. And when you bring all of them and do research together, you see that whatever they do in terms of research, whatever they find, the bonding that happens in terms of team is really strong. That could be, by the way, one of the arguments to move research forward and design in general is that it's a great affect, a great impact on team bonding and breaking the silos between the different departments of the company. And that's a side effect, but that's the huge benefit generally for the companies. And you can use that, so sometimes you understand when a company is more driven by those political type of thing and lots of division, you can use research and design to really change the way that they work internally and reach great results with them.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think yeah, I'm trying to think about what to add to this product owner BA type of what we call maybe in the delivery space, where in the cold phase where you guys collaborate. That's really key. You want to open it up. You really want to open it up and make it like collaborative, like it's a design-led thing, but it's not a design thing at all. Right? Like you really kind of want to just really own it, but don't own it type of thing, and find ways to kind of pull people into that. So there's that piece, but always that's what we're trying to do now. Like open the invites. If there's user testing, if there's research of any kind on any of the streams, open up the invites to everybody. Right now that we're doing stuff remotely, especially, it's even easier, right? Hey guys, here are all the teams invites, for the research we're doing this week. Come and join, right? But when we do things in the physical environment, to go to face and stuff like that, take these people with, that even if they don't do all the sessions, do 1 or 2 sessions, it really does hook people, right? People expressing their problems, they've got real life challenges. Nobody goes back to the office the same, right? So that's really important to expose people, as Jan is saying, go out there and talk to the people. It's obviously a little bit more difficult with execs. So obviously a little bit more difficult with the execs, and that's why I kind of try to stick to the risk of the investment with them. To say, for me to put my hand on my heart and say, this is the right thing, this is the right way of doing it, I have to go talk to people. The executive sponsorship is a tricky one to solve. I don't, like as a practitioner, it's not something that you can really solve for yourself. Most of the times, it's something that must already kind of pre-exist, in the organization. Ideally, if you're kind of a rock star designer researcher, you probably can influence some execs and bring them with you into that space. We've seen it happen where it was new in the organization. We had some strong design leaders, and the execs became the advocates. Right, the execs became the advocates for a user-centered process. So yeah, and it wasn't just rhetoric. It wasn't just we've got some designers, we know they're doing the right thing and they're doing customer-centric work. So yeah, I'm struggling to kind of think of what are the specific tactics around this, other than to really do, find projects that are important, and try and, follow the process in there and demonstrate, really create a kind of local case study around that, because they will carry that with them forever. And they'll say, okay, cool. If we're going to do this, are we bringing those people in? Are they doing the research? Can we also see the insights? Right. So yeah, that's really important. I think the transparency is the number one. Everybody can participate and everybody can see the insights, right? To play back the videos, play back. Our service design team does well here to play back customer call center calls, to share them with some of the execs, some of the gut-wrenching stuff, right? Like, some things that have to do with death claims and so on and so forth in our space, So those are the things, like, really kind of try and also bring the research and bring the user, into their face or into their space as well. That's one of the things with execs, right? So transparency at all levels. And then there's this thing about that executive sponsorship, and educating them and finding a project that you can probably use it, that if we can crack this one and actually, and actually show value, then, yeah.
Cindy, can I add something? You make me think about something very interesting around the videos. And for the first time, we had a client organizing a user video party within their organization. So they're going to take the recording we had from the research. We need to edit that a little bit to cut, the right moments. And they're going to organize a party open to all the companies. And I was picturing in my head people, with popcorn and everything, just watching a user talk. And they actually chatted on the chat at the same time. So it's nothing very formal. But, to just invite tons of people to have this, view of 10 or, 15 users using the product. And I found that really great way and fun way also to engage. And it's not necessarily your manager, but you just open up to everyone. And I found it very cool to do. Actually, not many companies do that.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. I think one other thing I'd like to add to that, other than the relationships, the user party is a good idea. I'm going to pitch it. But especially with teams now, it's become a little bit easier, right? To just have all the, with remote work, with remote testing and stuff. It's a bit easier to get all the videos, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, what I wanted to add to this thing is that we have to understand the organization's processes. So this is less about the who and the who, the stakeholders and the how, right? It's important to understand the organization's processes really well, and so that you can try and fit, right? It's almost like, UCD, your approach towards, like, you have to understand the process that people use to either make decisions, build products really well, because it's not always the same, and then try and find ways to say, okay, cool, this is where we're going to do it, and also at some point get to formalize it, right? You have like the program officers and people who are in charge of the method of building products in organizations, and it's important to build those relationships as well and make them understand, hey, by the way, do you know what a designer actually has to do to get their work done? You know that the dev needs to set up environments, do this, do that, do that. Do you know what the designer needs to do? Oh, okay. So some of that stuff we take for granted. So, so it's also like those kind of product managers, program managers, those people, they need to also actually be educated as to the importance of something like this. So that's one of the things that I think we often overlook. We just work with the POs and the PM. We know what we're doing, but the people who are planning and managing budgets and stuff like that, sometimes they're like, no, but why is this taking so long? And it's giving pressure with the teams and so on. But yeah, those are some things.
Cool. Thanks for that. Jan, how would you like to see research evolve in the continent?
Well, for us, it's a no-brainer. We want it to be much more iterative. I think it's great when you have people doing research and they have one large project research per year, and that's good, lots of learning. But I think research should be much more iterative to bring value, and it's specifically qualitative research. I think people understand that more and more for quantitative research, but right now they need to understand that you need to have an approach that mixes both quantitative and qualitative studies on an iterative basis. And when I say iterative basis, that instead of having your annual research, when you try to answer any question, you need to be ready for any new feature, any new ideas, or any new problem that you see, to be able to do a research with maybe 5 or 10 questions on that in a quantitative and qualitative manner. And we see that coming notably from tech startup. And this is actually why we started this platform called Luca, where people can just go there, run the studies, and they don't need any research firms. They don't need to contract with us, to pay us, all the thing that takes time sometimes. They can just go fast and take research into their own hands, even if sometimes it's not perfect, but you bring content, you try to raise their level in terms of building questionnaire, analyzing the data, making those correlations. But I think once you do that, you really got people to play with data and more qualitative type of data as well. I think you really reach a point where people get excited by that. And I think this is really what we wish in the long term, is that people, just do research like that. As soon as they have a question, it's not about a debate. It's just, okay, well, how can I throw a research, and the next day I have some answers that are relevant. And I really see that coming. It's going to take a little bit of more time, but I'm really confident that this is where we're going to be.
Cindy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think what was important, there was an important point that Jan touched on, and it was really the quantitative piece. I think it's often overlooked or seen as something different from the qualitative side of things. And I think in my space, I think what I've seen is that we're trying to get designers and just people in general more comfortable with just doing some basic quantitative kind of analysis, right, through the tools that exist in our organizations. Go to Google Analytics, just take a look at our age spread in terms of what our users. Take a look at some basic things, right? What technology people are using, just to get comfortable with some basic levels of quantitative research and analysis, so to speak, right? Even if we're not actually actively doing surveys. Just to kind of get some of that so that you can ask those whys, and then you can build onto that. I think that's really important. Instead of just going in and saying, all right, we've got a problem, we're going to build some qualitative research objectives around this problem. So that's really the piece. I think we've always done it, but I think it's also about getting it to where designers and other researchers are just comfortable that I may be strong with qualitative, but how do I make sure that it's also informed by the quantitative stuff, which is more, which is also usually readily available in our spaces. You can check usage, you can call you can talk to our advanced analytics teams to kind of understand some of the behavior they're seeing in the data science space. So this is where, for me, the evolution really is to say, it's this thing of data, right? Like, what does it actually mean for us as designers? Right? This thing for me is really critical. This is really like the thing that I'm kind of trying to grapple with personally right now, to say individually right now, to say, how do I bring this closer to the team, right? How do I bring this data world closer to the team? Because there's a lot of insights that sit over there, and those are the insights that will help us do lighter and more iterative research, qualitative research, right? So that's really the thing. We've tried to we're building a position. We've created a position in our space now that we're going to market for a quantitative researcher, UX researcher, right? Just somebody who's going to bridge that gap between our data science team, they're a big team and they're quite a mature team, and us, right? We don't speak the same language, right? But every now and then we can realize that we're trying to solve for the same thing, using different methods, right? So if we can bridge those gaps, I think it's a powerhouse, because we start to triangulate with all our research methods. So yeah, that's really for me the next big evolution. If we can start to leverage the quant quite a bit more, and then we get a lot of qualitative insights from our analytics team as well, surprisingly, right? Because they've got such a wealth of data, they can see behavior in the data, right? So therefore, they can actually inform. They can actually inform design, based on the data that they're doing, and help us set better research objectives. Yeah, so that's really, really for me the next frontier in terms of what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Very cool. I have my eye on the time. We have room for one more question from the audience. And as we wait for that to roll in, as part of this evolution, how can researchers prepare themselves for that? So what skill sets would be necessary for researchers to be able to realize this, this vision, and for organizations to be able to strengthen their research functions? Jan, you can take it first, then we can have Cindy go.
Well, I may have maybe an approach that is really skills oriented on a researcher, outside of all the things we already said about convincing the stakeholders. But I think what we're looking for when we try to find the pearl in terms of user research is someone who is able to run good interviews. And be able to run good interviews is to never be satisfied with the answer that you have. And people who always ask why, I don't understand, and really try to dig. And this is one of the things that I found the hardest in the young people that we recruit, even ourselves. Sometimes when you feel a little bit tired, your brain is not as sharp. And so you don't dig into the thing you need to dig into. Second, and that's really linked to that, is the analysis, the capability to really extract from all the things that are interesting out there, what is the valuable insight. And this definition of a valuable insight is really hard to point precisely. It needs to be something that brings value to the business, that brings value to the user, that is somewhat implementable or actionable, but it's really, really hard to find. And that is not easy for young people to find what could be, and even within your team, and even with your clients or the organizations that sometimes don't know. I would say the third thing is to know a little bit about, the design process. You could be a researcher, but don't know nothing about that. And I guess having some of those tools to co-create, to bring solution is also very helpful, to prototype very rapidly, because it brings new way to get insights. And rapidly, testing on some of the ideas that you may have with your team. And I would say the fourth one, which is, not the first, but quite important, is the sector knowledge. And it comes with a balance, because the more knowledge, sometimes the less you really research. So it is tricky, but I found that especially working in agriculture or in health tech, where you have a lot of very specific thing about a sector, if you don't know that, you spend a lot of time researching things for you and not actually for your organization. And I found that quite interesting to be able to build that. And very happy, by the way, to hear people in the room over here. I see great researchers, and maybe sharing about the challenges they had when they had to learn on that journey could be super interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I think on my side, I'm not too pedantic about the skill set of, let's call it, the general practitioner, so to speak, than I am about some level of having somebody who owns, like I said, like maybe I say we have a qualitative UX researcher, a senior qualitative UX researcher, who's able to kind of, have some guardrails, build a little bit of a framework to test people's test objectives. Is this something you're just understanding for yourself? Is this something that's actually going to contribute to, to understanding the user ecosystem, et cetera, et cetera? So we try to do that quite a bit. Yes, you're a designer and stuff like that. We're not going to crit you when you come into the organization about how deep your research skills are, but you'll be expected to do research. So how do we support that, right? So how do we make sure that there's some level of kind of, like I call it, some ownership, right? So that's kind of how we try to set it up here, where we have even UI design, who owns it, UX design, who owns it. Now, okay, with research, who owns it? actually now we realize that quant is significantly more important than it ever was. Okay, who's going to own quant research? Who's going to own qualitative research? And then we kind of have a structure where, if you're going to test, at least let's have some visibility against the framework or the guardrails that we set up around that. So for me, that's really what I like to stress, because like we said, we don't want to set too much prerequisites for people who want to join us with the research, whether it be a BA, a product owner, etc., right? So that's really it in terms of how do you just support it well and kind of bake quality into the process and make sure it's as methodical as possible. So what we do also then at the tail end of this is to also say what we encourage 2 debriefs at the end of every user test or at the end of every research session. That debrief has to do with the insights that came out, what we all understood, and it also has to do with the researcher themselves, right? Let's discuss, the method. Was the outcome right? Were the questions right? Did we ask them? Did we frame them right? Etc. Did we probe? That sort of thing. So that's what we always encourage. That our debriefing sessions are always in 2 parts, because then we start to kind of mature the skill itself, right? Because we have to talk about the skill itself, and the probing skill is something that I've seen some BAs, business analysts, do better than an actual designer. So it's just about really getting guys to be more deliberate about it and understand that it's actually important to not just come in and just ask questions, but to be a little bit more structured about it. So those are the things on my side.
Thanks for that. We're 3 minutes over time. I will take one last question from the audience, and then we will close at that. We have a question that has come in from LinkedIn, so unfortunately I won't be taking any other questions. This is the last question, Cindy Yan. What is the impact of our assumptions and biases on data and the kind of data that we present and communicate? And how do we suspend this bias as practitioners? So this question really, I would want to hear the response less about research, more about just general practitioners within an organization, because no one is exempt from bias.
Absolutely, really good point. I can start, and Cindy, I guess you have a lot of experience on that too, but there is 2 levels. There is the level of the one practicing in the research and the one that you want to bring into that already have the confirmation bias. I guess this is one of the bias that is the strongest. People who think they know something, and actually those people who are in management in companies are the most experienced sometimes. And this is where the problem comes from, because they believe they know the customer, but 6 months before the customer was totally different. And this is sometimes what they don't understand, is that, in our continent, things are moving so fast that even if you know something, 6 months after, you don't know it anymore. And this is hard, to share. After that, I think that there is the best way to break biases, because naturally there is, and we experienced a lot of that, because more and more, and especially since COVID, we don't do the research ourselves. We build capacity from team to do it, and we have 1 or 2 people from our team doing the research with the client. But we really appreciate the fact that we can build the capacity of the team so that they can also carry that research skills with them in the future. But what we found very difficult is when you have only one small groups or homogeneous groups. So for instance, the product team, they're always kind of the same. They're going to do research, but they have so many biases already about what they want to do in terms of product that they're really not going to research properly. But if you link to this team, or the team like the marketing team, or like the customer support team, or the field agent team, then you're going to bring other people with other biases. I'm not saying that they don't have biases, but at least the fight between their own assumptions can create a common ground, and the solution lies in the research and the data that you're going to collect speaking with your users. And I believe this is one of the best way to do it. Naturally, at the end of the day, there is still a very strong matter of leadership and who speak the loudest, and that's really sad, because it's not the quality of the insight. Sometimes it's the one who said something very loud that gets his message through. But I think there is a way you can mitigate that. And naturally, it's great to have people from the outside. And I really encourage even if it's like one researcher that you take from the outside, is great, because someone who doesn't know your company can play a role of referee, I would say, and try to balance the ideas and the assumption of everyone in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a quick one for me on that one is really this thing that I was talking about with collaborating with having some level of ownership and collaborating with other designers. I think that's really important over and above the stuff that Jan has mentioned. I think I agree with all of those, definitely. But we find that that's where we, when we talk to designers about, okay, cool, we see you're going to do some research. What are your objectives? I may not read your entire protocol, but at least I understand your objectives. And then in the session, some of the designers can give you feedback about how you asked something, et cetera, whether, now you're just trying to confirm something, you're not really asking an open-ended question type of thing. That's really how we try to counter those biases. Make sure that you own homework, right? Let's expose other people to the work so that they with fresh eyes, they can say, no. Maybe you need to be asking that question a bit differently, or you need to approach that a bit differently. And same thing with the stakeholders, right? And their stuff and their biases and the things that they know because they're knowledgeable in their spaces. Put it into the research. You don't need to argue with them up front. Right, we just put it. We just we go and ask the users regardless. Say it's part of our process. We need to confirm what you've said to us, and then see if the data confirms or nullifies what they're saying, and then we show them the data. But that's really it. Succinctly as I can put it. Thanks.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks, Jan. I really appreciate what you guys have said on getting more eyes on your work and get people to critique that so that their biases, your biases, all kind of diffuse each other. We'll end it at that. We are not taking any more questions, but thank you so much to everyone who asked questions. Thank you so much, everyone who made the time to attend this conversation. I believe that the recording will be shared. Carol can respond to that on the chat. Just let us know what platforms we can find the recording for this. Thanks, everyone. Have a good Friday. We'll close at that. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Cindy. And thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Cheers.
See you.